Hi, and welcome to the SEO Kitchen Show. We'll get started in just a moment, but just so you know, you are at the SEO webinar series where SEO cooks from around the world debate in fiery discussions to balance out the flavors of their recipes and come up with the best SEO tips. So I'm your host, Rebecca Barbel, and today with me I have Montserrat Cano, Luke Carthy, Nikki Holloway, and Rico Meltzer. I'm really happy to have this group here. This is an amazing group of e-commerce experts, or at least e-commerce specialists, and they have some amazing things to share with you today. So just so we get to know everybody, I'm going to ask them to present themselves. Montse, would you like to begin? You're on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. Thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Montserrat Cano. I'm an international SEO and digital marketing consultant working globally for global brands now from Madrid.
Super. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Luke, how are you?
Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Luke Carthy. I am an e-commerce consultant and I absolutely adore food. So right place. And I just really crave sweet and sour now. So I guess that's what's for dinner. But yeah, really excited to be here and have a chat about SEO, maybe snacks, we'll see.
Oh yeah, definitely we're going to get some snacks worked in here somehow. Nikki, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, I'm Nikki Halliwell. I'm Senior Tech SEO Consultant, Senior Tech SEO Manager, at Rise at 7, as well as a freelance Tech SEO Consultant for myself. And yeah, so I work across agency as well as freelance for all sorts of e-commerce and health, hospitality and fashion brands and all that fun stuff. Yeah, definitely enjoy plenty of food. Still trying to decide what to have tonight, so we'll see what suggestions Luke comes up with as part of this.
I'm looking forward to that. And Rico.
Yes, hello, Berlin. My name is Rico. I'm an SEO consultant, and I'm 15 years now in the online marketing business. Several agencies, but also some in-house positions. And happy to be here and to discuss with the people in the audience, and looking forward to it.
Great. With that, we're just going to jump right in. I think one of the most interesting questions that we have is, what is your favorite e-commerce success story? It doesn't have to be a website that sells food.
Damn, this is a good one. All right, so I'm going to jump in and I'm going to completely derail from the world of SEO for a minute, because it had very little to do with SEO whatsoever, but it did have a lot to do with user experience. So I won't name drop the client because, one, I don't want to get sued, and two, it doesn't really add to the story. But what I will say is a client, self-confessed, realized that they had a problem. They didn't know what it was, but sales were eroding, things were tricky. And long story short, I did a complete site search audit, took a look at their top 10,000 or so search queries and realized the top sort of 10% of queries, which made up about 50-60% of their traffic, yielded really poor results. So we completely rebuilt their site search, put in a new solution, uplifted the experience, added redirects to kind of improve where people land when they search for things on the site. And we had a 30% uplift in revenue through search, which was a big, almost, I wouldn't call it overnight, but within a business week, we saw a substantial difference in the performance of conversion from search. And as we know, people that use site search the numbers are vague depending on vertical, but typically 5 to 6 times greater in terms of conversion than people that don't use site search. So it's really important to get it right. But we started with that, and then that kind of went, right, we're going to throw some more money at you. Where else can you spend it? And that's where we kind of jumped into SEO and other areas of digital from that space. But yeah, that was one of the probably biggest wild cards, because I was brought in to do SEO and I was like, SEO is your problem, but you have bigger issues. Let's fix those first.
I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind in a lot of cases, not only in e-commerce, but particularly in sites that have such a direct link to conversions and revenue.
Yeah, we had a somewhat similar one, but with a large fashion client that we were working with. We started off just by doing keyword research and looking into the way that their users were interacting with the site, and then we realised on the back of that there was some significant opportunities that were missing from their main navigation. So they already had the products available for these, but there were options that were hidden and more difficult for their customers to get to. And it was only through the keyword research and combining that with the GA data that we found these opportunities. And that meant that we reorganized that, and we would make sure that we were showing things like party dresses during party season, so during the holidays and things like that. And during the summer, we'd have summer dresses, maxi dresses, and those sort of options were more accessible. But another one that we found that they weren't talking about as much as their competitors was actually plus size dresses and those sorts of items. So just by reorganizing that and going with the trends at the moment, but also, you know, seasons, that's a really significant increase in their performance. Again, it wasn't overnight, as Luke said, but definitely over the weeks and months, you saw like really significant numbers. I don't have the numbers to hand, and I definitely should have, but I can dig them out. But it was a big success for the client, and they were very happy.
Montserrat, do you have something to share?
You're on mute.
You're muted again.
There we go. So one of my success stories is with also a fashion website, a jewelry site. Actually, we needed to perform a big migration, which was decided before I came in. This was during the pandemic, actually, and with all the issues and the other issues that were on top, etc., etc. So we well, there was a huge possibility that things didn't just go well, particularly because business wanted to go really, really quickly. But it was a migration from Prestashop to Shopify, and in the end, it was successful because I think partly was because we managed to make sure that there were no content duplications, and all the main things were right, but particularly the categories that were set up right with the right copy, which it was not what was happening before on Prestashop, with very excellent high quality pictures, etc., etc. So in the end, we managed to avert all of the issues, or many of the issues that any migration might have had, and it helped us to achieve the commercial achievements, commercial objectives that we were striving to achieve.
That's a good one. Migrations are tough.
Yes, they are, actually, particularly when businesses want to do it for yesterday. So a huge part of the job was to manage expectations and say that things were not going to happen in a month, nor two. It happened within between 2 and 3 months. And it was okay. Not everyone was happy with that, but from an SEO perspective, an e-commerce perspective, things went really, really, really well in terms of sales and everything. Traffic did drop down a little tiny bit, but because sales actually did well, it didn't really matter at that moment in time. There were some issues that we needed to sort out. So we just kind of made a plan, and we started to sort them out over time.
Yeah, migrations are tough, huh? Migrations are. I'm literally. I don't even know if you got a slide on migrations, but migrations, I think, give everyone here either brings you to tears or puts a smile on your face, depending on if you won or lost. But yeah, one thing that I love about migrations is the fact that you never really migrate just to one site. Like you migrate the most recent site, and then you start digging around. You go through Wayback Machine, you realize, hold on. There are 2 legacy sites here that I've found that now need to be redirected. And then you update the redirects from the current site, and then you end up kind of almost just migrating 2 or 3 sites on top of each other, to the point where now migrations, I think you quote, and then you've got to add like a buffer of like 30% at least, because there's always got to be nasties that you find. And the quite literal example of people brushing stuff under the carpet, which comes out when you are planning a migration, right? So they're always huge, especially in the world of e-commerce and parameters and everything else as well, right?
No,
But
yeah.
nice work, Monse, on getting that nailed, because it's not always easy to do.
No, thank you. And also legacy, think about legacy URLs as well, not just a different website, but a different sets of URLs that are probably campaign pages, landing pages, old products that I didn't even know whether we had or not, and I could see some of those products lying around as well in the warehouse, and I was thinking, do we actually need these pages or don't we not? They didn't even know that. So I guess managing products, which is I know another question, is very, very important for a website.
Yeah, like product image URLs as well. Like, you know, if the image URLs are changing as part of the migration and you're not counting them as part of your redirect, you can lose quite a bit of traffic as well. And that's one that I find often gets missed, and people don't tend to think about images, especially product images, when they're doing their redirect mapping. That's definitely one to look out for.
And I can definitely see that coming up if you're migrating from one platform to another, but we might touch on that later.
Exactly, yeah.
Rico, do you have a success story that you'd like to share?
Yes, for sure. And it was, 1 or 2 years ago. It was a tricky technical case of a retailer for glasses and lenses. And they had a separate domain set up for mobile and desktop devices. So the M. subdomain just for mobile devices, and the www subdomain for desktop devices. And from one day to the next, they lost completely their desktop visibility. This was a huge impact in revenue and money, and was a big problem in this company. And we did a lot of research and testing and tried this and that and looked in the Search Console and crawling and all those things we are looking at. And to make a long story short, the problem at the end was that they had hard user agent redirects. This means if a mobile device, a user or bot is accessing a desktop URL, they always will be redirected to the mobile version. And if the desktop user or desktop bot is accessing a mobile URL, they always have been redirected to the desktop URL. And that's something we should never do. Never do hard user agent redirects, even for bots. It's like doing hard redirects like on an IP base. It's never a good idea. All mobile bots should be able to crawl desktop content, and desktop bots should be able to crawl mobile content. And they removed this hard redirect for bots. And from one day to another, visibility was back. Everyone was happy, and yeah, that's so simple in some cases. But it was very interesting to do this research, and yeah, was a tough time, but a interesting learning.
How did you figure out what was going on?
It was not just my work. I also discussed it with my colleagues, with my SEO bubble, and so on. And we figured out it couldn't be something like changing a little thing. It must be a bigger problem. And at the end, it was the only possible solution. And I also talked to Martin Splitt from Google, and I really did everything what I could do. And at the end, it was the only solution. Please remove the user agent-based redirect. It's not a good idea.
Sounds good. I'm glad that worked out. When we're talking about e-commerce SEO, do you think that should have its own category? Is that a separate type of SEO, or is that just like any other SEO?
Good question. I guess it's, you know what, to play devil's advocate here, what if I ask you the question, like, are clothes for children different to clothes from adults? Like, they're still clothes, right? They're just with a slightly different application. That is a terrible analogy. I should have really put more thought into that. I always think that anyone who says e-commerce SEO is a different world to SEO in general is almost trying to sell snake oil or justify why they're doubling the price. I think e-commerce SEO is nuanced, but let's be honest, a redirect on an e-commerce site is the same as a redirect on a blog or on a static site or on another kind of CMS, right? But I think there are just tweaks, quirks, things to look out for. I think Nikki's brought up a perfect one earlier about images. There are just kind of little things, refinements, and things that you really need to pay attention to in the world of e-commerce that are different. But principally, e-commerce is probably an offshoot of SEO, but it's not a completely different world. And anyone that says that to you, normally I think is full of nonsense. I'll try my best not to swear on this because I'm sure this is a family show, right? But yeah, it's different, but not worldly. It's a fragment off, right? That would be my opinion.
I see some people nodding. Is that something everyone agrees with?
Oh, totally. I totally agree. I asked this question a few days ago because I have been in conversations or have heard of conversations where they were saying, not related to e-commerce, but related to media in particular, that SEO and in media is totally different, and a broad somebody who has done SEO elsewhere can't probably do it in media, which I thought was like, what? I mean, if you don't know anything about redirects as or images, as my colleagues here were saying, it's just like you can't perform SEO anywhere. We've got, one of the good things about SEO is that we've got transferable skills, and I have basically built a career on just that. I have worked in e-commerce, financial services, SaaS products, etc., etc. I mean, I have performed SEO in all of those areas, and to me, all of the skill sets that you need to I mean, the skill set that you need to use in one area, you need to use it in another area as well. Of course, there are some differences because, for example, for e-commerce, you need to take into account image. Well, I think image can be taken into account for SaaS products as well. I mean, whenever you have a website, you have images, so you have to think about that. But in e-commerce, you have to use a very good image. You can't really get away without that. I don't know, homepage, for example, is rather important, a lot more important than perhaps in other areas where I would actually put a lot more weight on internal pages, etc., etc. But when we think about internal linking, for example, that applies to all areas. It just goes across the board. So, I mean, somebody tell me otherwise. Might be wrong here, but I don't think so.
No, I'm just sat here nodding, agreeing with you both. I'm not going to disagree at all. Yeah, I think there are differences with e-commerce and other SEO, but that doesn't make them different. As Luke said, the analogy of redirects on a service-based site, you would approach them in the same way with an e-commerce site. There's just more of them, and exactly as Monsi just said with the internal linking. Yeah, there's just different things to look out for. You have to look out for how the faceted navigation is managed, and concerns with stock and that sort of thing. But it's not a completely different aspect of SEO.
Yes, I totally agree. For me, e-commerce is the standard case in SEO. It's something special. Mostly, it's all the SEO world consists of e-commerce SEO with product listing pages, product detail pages, some filters, some sorting. It's standard. It's nothing special. And the challenge, my point of view, is to give advice and consulting to the customers, but not with the SEO text. You have to do something special and better. But if you are looking to a totally different category of SEO, you have to look at publishing, Google News. This is a really different area and different rules and different crawlers, different ranking. Everything is different in Google News and publishing, but e-commerce is standard and mostly boring.
I wonder if I should caveat this now just to make it more interesting. I tell you what, I think e-commerce SEO, everything that we said is perfect. But what I would say is that it takes more than just SEO. Maybe it's more fragmented in terms of multidiscipline to be able to make e-commerce perform. So of course, if you think about it, right, like if you optimized and got 30% more traffic to an e-commerce store, that is a great metric to get to, but that doesn't necessarily equate to sales, right? So there's like additional skills that you need to think about, like conversion, like sales funnel, like pricing, like user experience, like site search, like category navigation, findability, taxonomy. So there's a lot more skills that I would say go into the world of e-commerce versus, say, a 30% uplift in traffic to an affiliate site is likely to have a stronger impact in terms of return on investment, because you're getting your traffic through affiliate links or through your display networks and kind of catching things through that perspective. So I would say there's almost two answers to this question. Should e-commerce have its own category of SEO? You could argue yes or no, but I don't think it warrants enough to kind of make it a super kind of power within the world of SEO. But additionally, there are more skills that you need to kind of have with you in your team or as an independent consultant that kind of complement your SEO work to make sure it makes sense at the other end, which is revenue, sales, conversion, lifetime value, and whatever sexy acronym metrics you want to kind of measure at that particular point. But yeah, either way, I love it. I'm obsessed with it. So fun and games.
So it sounds like you'd go for more of, it's a definite specialization, but it's not a different world.
Perfect. Just that. That's the answer.
So one of the things that we know works a lot on e-commerce sites, rather than, say, a basic SaaS website where you've hand-coded all of your pages, is the use of templates. What are some of the common characteristics of page templates on an e-commerce site? So should you treat them differently, or do they perform differently? I see some thinking going on. Nikki, do you have something to say there?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the best way to word it. Yes, that they have elements, of course, such as the prices and all these things. But I think the most important aspect with any page template, whether it's product or not, is to make sure that it's not detracting from the overall shopping experience. That's the whole point of an e-commerce site, is to convert, of course, but you want to make sure that the key information, such as the product information and all that, is as friendly as possible. Make sure that you've got the ability to make use of the product information that you have, whether you use like a product information system or not, but whatever it is you're selling, you'll likely have sizes, measurements, colors, all of that fun stuff. That's all valuable information that people are looking for. So make sure that you include that on your page templates and that they're easy to read and easy to find. Especially if your competitors aren't doing it, make sure that you do include it, because that's another USP or something that people can find on yours that they won't find on others, that can help them convert with you instead.
We might have gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves. I see a question in the chat about what do we mean by templates?
All right. So templates, or at least my perspective, because templates have different contexts, right? Like if we're talking about a Shopify theme, someone might address that as a template. But in this context, I guess in the world of SEO, we're talking about like a product page is a template, a PLP page or a category page is a template, the home page is a template, search results page is a template. But essentially, e-commerce SEO works off templates, right? You amend your product page template. You have 15,000 products you've just rolled out. Congratulations, 15,000 changes, which is great, or a horrendous mistake, depending on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing to do. But that is the beauty and also risk of e-commerce SEO, right? But I would say common characteristics of page templates for e-commerce site. This is an interesting question. I think one of them that I constantly see, even today, and I rant about this all of the time, but we wouldn't be in jobs if everyone had this nailed, pagination, right? Pagination is like one of the things where a lot of people get it wrong. There's lots of different flavors of getting it wrong. And to give you a couple of examples, let's say, for example, you have 15 pages of a product in a category. A lot of websites will canonicalize page 2 and up to the root page, which I understand the argument for, because I guess there's less URLs. It's easier for Google to go away and get around. But let me throw something to you. If you have products that are on page 2, 3, 4, and 5, if you're going to canonicalize them to the root page, you aren't able to pass the equity to those products that are on deeper pages, which basically means that items that people are searching for, whether it's in something more ambiguous or something really specific, you have a lesser chance to rank for that particular item. So really, all of your pagination should be self-referencing when we talk about canonicals. And as always in the world of SEO, there's the exception and everything else, and I'm sure there's rules and so on that we need to talk about that are important. And one more, just to kind of throw it out there, is faceted navigation. Like, we could spend like the next hour just talking about this and probably still not get through everything, but there are just some key pillars, non-negotiables, good to have, best practice things that should happen on every single page template. I'm on a roll, so I'll give one more, which is your homepage should be the perfect foundation for your internal linking strategy, right? So whether that's linking to your key products, your key categories, but also your subcategories, your key brands, like all of this stuff is perfect, and your homepage can really have a big influence on how well or how poorly certain things rank, whether that's products or categories, because you've got seasons. I have a client that, for example, ranks really well for hay fever tablets, weirdly autumn winter, but struggles in the summer. Sorry, no, the opposite way around. And the main reason is their homepage is littered with travel, allergies, and that really helps them to rank because their homepage is all about merchandising those things. Well, then you've got like cold and flu tablets and those sort of things when we kind of get the sniffles during the winter, which completely falls off because there's no permanent internal linking structure. Their homepage is able to have that much flux or create that much flux for them. But yeah, just a couple of things that I guess are really important when it comes to templates.
Yes, that's true. Also, in terms of pagination, a big topic and a lot of mistakes. But as I'm looking visually on templates and page design, my point of view, all templates are the same all across the market, especially in the mobile first world. There are some products, some product listing, and some filters and product detail pages nearly look all the same. They are the same products, same inventory, same images that all retailers have, same description that all retailers have, sometimes also the same prices. And so nearly big retailers all looking at the same, especially on mobile. And that's a big chance, but also a big opportunity for differentiation is consulting and advice. Google can also list products on their SERP, but they can't give advice yet. And that's the chance to differentiate your shop from another, especially if all pages look the same on mobile, my point of view.
I think when we are talking about templates in terms of the templates that we use for products, for homepage, for reviews, etc., when we are thinking about that, what I have come across many times is that people are not using the same templates for each category, so to speak. So a little bit of consistency will actually help. It's not about SEO. It's about landing on a page, landing on a website, and knowing exactly what I am looking at. So if we need, if the same template is being used across all product pages, then it's fantastic because it helps out the user to understand that that is a product that they can buy, etc., etc. Whereas if they use different templates, as I have seen sometimes, that doesn't help at all, because obviously the CTA button is not where it is expected. Maybe the image is not as big as it should be. Maybe the product description is not on top. Maybe you have to scroll down, etc., etc. So that's one thing. And then if we are thinking templates as in themes, website themes, then I think my main thing there is about speed load. They should basically make sure that or help make sure that the website loads very, very fast.
That makes sense. Nikki, did you have anything that you wanted to add? Sounds great. Luke was sort of getting into something that might be related to this question about, are e-commerce sites particularly susceptible to duplicate content? And I think in a lot of cases, this can be linked to faceted navigation or not. But I'll leave that up to you guys.
Yes.
Perfectly succinct answer. Does everyone agree?
Totally. Just think about all those products that are across different categories and in different areas of the website, or CMS that produce different the same URLs, the duplicated URLs. I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud, but that's so many categories as well. I think so many cases, and I think the way to deal with this is to make sure that you create URLs that are unique, with unique content on it. In terms of categories, for example, you could write a specific copy which is also unique on top of it, so that you actually you have very, very, very clear. You make it very clear to people that they are in a different page, on a different category. Because I have seen categories with the same pictures even, and they were different categories. So different pictures and very similar copy. So that's one thing to deal with this. Just thinking.
Do you know what? I'm going to throw a caveat in here real quick, Monty.
Go.
Sometimes duplicate content doesn't actually matter. Sometimes it's not even a problem. Like in a perfect world, no page would be the same as another page. But the reality is, and I think in an imperfect world, that is an impossible task. I think Barbara has just put a comment in actually in the chat to say that it's hard to not duplicate content on product descriptions for similar products, and they're absolutely spot on. And also, Google's not stupid, right? Like if you sell, let's say for example, you sell a range of TVs, and it's the exact same TV, just available in 7 different sizes. Like you're not going to go away and write 7 unique descriptions because it's the same products in 7 different sizes. Yes, of course, you go and probably have one product page and had a variation and that sort of stuff. But I'm just using an example here. So like sometimes even removing the duplicate content doesn't necessarily impact your organic performance. It's like, what is worth spending the time deduplicating because we're going to get a return on that, whether it's an organic return or a financial return. Like sometimes it's just not a battle worth fighting, right? And I think we should absolutely have pillars in place to make sure that we don't do that at a category level, at a faceted navigation level, at a brand level. But there are just some things where especially if you're a retailer with like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands and sometimes even millions of SKUs, you are going to have quite dramatic overlaps. Marketplaces like eBay, OnBuy, Amazon. I mean, let's be honest, in a real world, they're not really in the same ballpark organically, but they are going to have horrendous amounts of duplication. But even if they fixed it all, I don't necessarily believe it'd be worthwhile spending the months, weeks, hours, days, millions on deduping, because I don't think it would come out the other end. So dedupe what is worth deduping, because it's good to do that rather than doing it because it's best practice. I guess it's that, it really is that it depends cliche answer, isn't it? But it is important, but not always.
No, I would agree with that, actually. I mean, when you have a lot of duplication to deal with, then you have to also think about other aspects that you need to fix as well, and then just put that into context. But it doesn't really mean that when we create URLs and everything that we need to not to have this in mind. So in my book, you need to try and make sure that the content is not duplicated, because it can be useful for not just for search engines, it's also for humans, right? And in terms of manufacturers, because I'm thinking about one of the many possible ways in which content can be duplicated. For example, the manufacturer descriptions. It's so very difficult to actually do something creative around it, but it can be possible. I remember. I think it was Asics or Adidas. I can't remember, or maybe Nike. One of them. They had this lovely pair of sports shoes on their website, and then ASOS had exactly the same pair of shoes with this exactly the same manufacturer's description. They added something else to the copy, so how to clean them, how to handle them, how to care for them. So there are ways to go around all these issues.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Go ahead.
Yes, that's totally true. It's the question of how high is the problem of duplicate content, and is there a systematic problem in your CMS system? And the classic case for sure is that the same problem or the same product or the same subcategory is available in different categories, but it then resides different URLs. Also filtering and sorting can double or multiply your pages and categories. They do some classic hacks like index or canonicals or masking links, but modern shop systems should be able to do the same product or subcategory in different categories and not producing URLs, and also should be able to that not every filter or function is producing new URLs. So it should be manually be able to select, does this function or filter produce an URL or not, and thus should be able in a modern shop system. And yeah, then a big problem is solved in my point of view.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what everybody else has said. I'll just sit here nodding along. I think I'm going to change my name to Noddy instead of Nikki at the end of this. But yeah, I think with anything in e-commerce, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And it's about, exactly as everybody else has said, like weighing up the balance between the effort of deduplicating certain bits. Is it going to actually give you a return on investment? Is it actually going to lead to more conversions, or is it something that's not going to make that much difference? You know, going back to the TV example earlier, is it going to matter to Google? No, because they're clever enough to work that out, but also think of what makes sense for your user. Don't fall into the trap, and this applies to everything. You know, don't just do something because it makes sense to Google. Google's not your customer, the user is. So think about it that way and use that to inform every decision. It's not just about whether it's worth deduplicating content, but is it worth doing anything on your e-commerce site? If it's not going to make a difference for your user, don't do it.
Love that, Nikki. That's awesome. Yeah, do it for your customer. I can't believe we haven't said that yet, but it's the cliche answer because it's brilliant. But I guess the second part of the question is, how do you deal with it? Many different ways. I guess the laziest way and probably the easiest way is with canonicals, although we already know the ins and outs of whether it decides to pay attention to them or not, or redirects, you know, or a combination of the two, but not blended together because that causes all sorts of grief. But what I probably would say is that is the exception where actually, in my perspective, duplication is kind of just like a faux pas. Like, in other words, it just shouldn't happen, is at the category level, right? Like, you shouldn't really have categories that are overlapping one another, because you're directly impacting the performance of how well a category can rank, but also you then have a challenge in terms of merchandising, right? Like, if you have 4 categories that are the same, let's say again TVs, dotted across home theater, sale, clearance, whatever that is, you have an SEO challenge, you have a merchandising challenge in terms of whether the products are going to be consistent. You then have like an equity challenge, because instead of having one prominent TVs category, you've got 4, and there's an equity split and a lot of other things there. But on a category level, you should only really have one category targeting certain things, right? And I think that's a relatively easy thing to work out, compared to on a product level, which is super granular and is almost impossible to target, right? Like, I think Barbara again has jumped in on the same products, different scent. First, you know, there is going to be a lot of crossover. If someone's searching for a brand of fragrance, there's going to be a lot of crossover, because it's all by Creed, or it's all by, I don't know, Armani or whatever. But yeah, I think Nikki's kind of echoed it perfectly. What does your user want? What does your user care about? Because sometimes burning those resources, those hours on deduping content might not have a return for you. But if you think about it in the way Nikki's mentioned, that's probably the best way to tackle it. And any kind of SEO priority in that case, what's going to be the biggest difference for your conversion, your customer? And search engines typically will follow by proxy, if you like, rather than doing it because the search engine said it's a good idea to do it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sum it up. Actually, this has gone by extremely quickly, and we are actually at the end of the time that we've allotted for the discussion, which means we can open the floor to questions. If you haven't already asked a question in the question box at the bottom right, you can go ahead and do that now. I know we have a bunch of questions already. We've had some on this type of question, like what is the best option to manage a basic product page with a lot of child pages and avoid duplication? But I think we've already touched on that. Do you feel like we've covered that at the moment? And a question that I think is actually an interesting one. How do you approach building complex site taxonomies from scratch? So say you have hundreds of thousands of products with multiple facets and so on. What should you care about the most? URL structures, category organization, product demand, control over crawling and indexing? What do you prioritize?
I love this question. This is, I'm such a geek, but this is my favorite part of ecom, is taxonomy structure. I want to give you 2 examples here. I'm going to channel my inner Nikki for a minute. What does your customer want? And also, I like to approach taxonomies like supermarket aisles, right? Like, what would you expect to see, and what would be easier for your user? One thing to remember as well is that your taxonomy is a very separate piece of technology and way to navigate the site from your mega menu, your navigation menu. They are not the same thing. And so many clients believe that just because a category exists in a subcategory exists in a category in your navigation means that exact same behavior needs to happen in the taxonomy, and that's not the case. For example, let's say you have I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of a client where this is going to work. So let's say you're an electronics retailer, and you have a home and entertainment category, and you might then have a Black Friday category, for example. Now, what you probably don't want to do is go and create a TVs category in Black Friday. There's always going to be edge cases here. I'm just rolling this off the tongue. And then a separate and identical category in the home and entertainment category for TVs as well. But what you probably do want to do is have a link to it in the drop down, and have a link to it in both Black Friday, in home and entertainment, maybe even somewhere else, but it always links to the same category. It's just a shortcut to help people to navigate, because as we know in supermarkets, I'm going to go down probably the tea and coffee aisle to go and find sugar, and maybe somebody else is going to go down the bacon aisle in the supermarket to find the sugar. The point is, no 2 people really shop the same to find the same thing. So don't build your navigation in a way where it's only one way to shop, because you're going to lose customers as a result of But additionally, keyword research is critical, right? Like if you want to understand how people search, the synonyms, where your subcategories should live, what they should look like, what you call them, URL structures, your keyword research will dramatically help. We've been able to understand all of that. But I love this topic. This is the thing that I properly geek out to. I love this stuff.
Nikki, you were doing some nodding there. Is there something in there that really speaks to you?
I'm always nodding, apparently. That's what I've discovered from this webinar as well. Just echoing again, like it goes back to what we were saying earlier with the fashion example. You know, we moved the likes of plus size dresses, and sorry, hopefully the noise outside isn't too loud. But yeah, the fashion example with the dresses, yeah, we moved that into the nav. But yeah, that wasn't the only way that people found those products, because obviously they weren't there before, and we saw that through the data, as I mentioned. And yeah, it was through taxonomies and site search, as was mentioned earlier, that they were able to find those before we added them in the nav. So yeah, they're not the same, and they don't fall into the trap of thinking that's a really good point.
One of the other questions here that is a kind of a sticky one. What is a good strategy for ranking a homepage for a keyword that primarily populates single product pages?
What? I don't know if anyone else gets it, but I don't understand that question. But typically, your homepage is only really good for ranking for brand and brand synonyms, right? And maybe best case, the headline thing that you sell if you're a niche retailer, like if you sell garden hoses, for example, searching for garden hoses might take you to your homepage. But if you sell everything from home and garden, then searching for garden hoses probably isn't going to take you to the homepage, and it's only there for targeting brand. So I can't put homepage and single product pages together in the same thing with a keyword. That doesn't work for me. If anybody else wants to take that, go for it.
Yeah, I think I read that as landing page rather than homepage when I first looked over the question. So I don't know whether that would be a specific landing page or a category page. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one?
I just wanted to say I do agree with Luke totally, because why would you want to rank your homepage for a product if you have a product page or a product category specifically? Maybe review keyword SEO strategy and see what is happening in there.
So take another look at the keyword strategy and focus on the product page maybe for that one.
Yeah, unless I have read that question wrongly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've got a couple other questions here. Let me see if I can see. I'm going to try to get one more in. Let's try for a product category that has a wide price range and for which search queries are price sensitive, for example, jewelry. Would you suggest having different landing pages targeting smaller price ranges, or one PLP with faceted navigation?
Start with search volume. If there's no search volume, there's no point doing the work. So like if no one's searching for necklaces under $100, for example, don't bother building it. But if there is search volume for it, then absolutely go and build it. But I love to test this by just building a random category and seeing if we can get it to stick by linking to it internally, see if we can get an exact match somewhere or a good keyword. And if we get if we start to get clicks and impressions off the back of that, then that might be a case to go away and think about rolling that out on a grander scale, however that looks. But normally when it comes to faceted navigation and prices, it's a no-go area to allow those things to be indexed. It's just like, how does that look? Are you going to index every individual price? Are you going to index ranges? There's probably not enough search volume to go and break out a whole additional 500,000 URLs across the site, right? Like it just probably isn't. But see if the search volume, or maybe write blog posts and then link to your products, right? Like do your keyword research, top necklaces for under $500 or under $100, or for him, for her, for birthdays, for anniversaries, for engagement presents, for christenings, and create blog posts and actually then just link to products. But there's a number of ways to go about it. And I think just start with the search volume and see. And then also Google it and see what Google is showing. Because if it's showing a load of content, probably should write content. If it's showing a load of products, you should probably like do a category. But like start with the data rather than the problem.
That sounds like a lot of what Nikki was saying earlier about what are people searching for? How do they shop?
We should just have a slide that just says, do what Nikki says, which is do what Nikki says at the end.
Definitely not. Nikki just nods. Nikki just agrees with everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something I have seen in small to medium websites, small to medium companies that have an e-commerce site, is that because they seem to believe that because they've got loads of products, they have to, and lots of price ranges and stuff, they have to put everything there into one single page. And sometimes it happens that they've got, say, a dress in so many different colors and the same dress with sleeves and without sleeves and everything. And they just feel that they have to have hundreds of pages in there, which of course is a lot more work. But then many people were not actually searching for even that dress. They were searching for something else. So all the work, internal work that you actually put in doing all that is kind of wasted. So yeah, definitely wait to see the data first and then you think about it.
That makes sense. I think we've reached the end of our time now. So I want to say thank you first to everyone who's come and spent time with us today. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I learned a lot. I enjoyed watching people nod and culling Luke's super intelligent way of looking at things, listening to Montse and seeing how Rico has attacked different problems. So thank you all four of you for everything that you've shared today. We have a final episode coming up in about 10 minutes, SEO and Data Science Cookies with Dawn Anderson, Brenda Malone, Brittany Mueller, Andrea Volpini, and hosted by my coworker, Magali. So if you're interested in that, I hope you'll join us for a final session. And thank you again very much from all of the Oncrawl team for joining us today.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Take care.